everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream with another edition of Curriculum of Fear. The one I had planned to do, which was to be a follow-up from last week's episode regarding how do you implement affinity groups into your schools. Well, it turns out that the modules that were mentioned in that video actually require a sign-up and an enrollment and a whole bunch of other hoops to jump through that I just would prefer not to, especially since it kind of required you to be a teacher, and I'm decidedly... I came across this one today. And what is this? I'll get to it in a moment, but first off, hope everyone's having a good Sunday morning. Hope everyone's well. A few hellos before we get into the meat of it. First off, before the stream started, thank you, Point Curation. Is our children learning? I guess the question is, what is our children learning? Rendered as such today. But thank you, Point Curation. And as well, let's see, Chicago Mike, Gay Rascal, Raziel, Check Your Logic, Mike R, Dr. Keeve, Old Guy Gamer, Jamie Melquist, Some Namyol Nation, Arc 210, Robert Pincus. I think I got everybody there, at least everybody presently. Hope you're all doing well. So I came across this video, which asked the very flat question, is your school racist? Which sounds in the same category as... have you stopped beating your wife kind of thing? A little bit loaded. But of course, my first reaction to that question is to ask another question. Well, is your school employing critical race theory? Or is it promoting the anti-racism ideology of Ibram X. Kendi and the like? That'd be my first question to find out if your school is racist. But more interestingly, this is coming from PBS. Public Broadcasting is asking this. So, per usual, I have no idea what we're about to see. I'm taken in by the question alone, the mystery of it. Is your school racist? And I'm curious to find out by what metric they decide to assess this. Thank you, Bacall the Driving Ape Man, for the banana. A banana? Truth be told, I'm not a big banana fan. I know. Might shock you. Or maybe not. I don't know. I've never really had an inclination. I don't hate them per se, but I don't pursue them. Let's put it that way. Eric Grunstadter, good morning. Bastard Beast, good morning. Debatefly, good morning. All right, so with that all being said, let's dive into this mystery box of education and revelation. Oh, by the way, because I was reminded sideways this morning, I have merchandise. I never bring it up that I have merchandise. I don't. I am so terrible at self-promotion in that regard. It doesn't occur to me to talk about it. So anyway, there's a link in the description to my Teespring store. If you happen to like a mug or a Moonbase t-shirt or a Pepperjack t-shirt or a TEDx t-shirt and other such things. There's even, I think it's still there, a coronavirus mask that on it simply says, got it, which is maybe not the message you want to be sending when wearing a coronavirus mask, but that's kind of the joke. Yeah. Anyway, all that being said, I will start out with a few seconds for sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it. The first few seconds here are silent because I took out the little musical cue at the front because I don't know if for some reason that's copyrighted. So let me know when you hear the sound.
What's up, everybody?
What's up, everybody? Everybody hear that? What's up, everybody? Let's see. Mike Savage, Blarg. And let's see. And the original Shroom, good morning. Let's see. What's up? Anybody? Okay, everybody hears that? All right, so this clocks in at just under 14 minutes, so it's kind of a TEDx length. We'll see if it can keep my attention that long.
Miles Best, journalist and host of this lovely show, Above the Noise.
Above the Noise. I've never heard of it, but okay.
Where we talk about some hot topics, some controversial issues, and sometimes I give dating advice.
Okay.
Dating advice.
Okay. That's not me. That's them, and that's kind of creepy.
Maybe eventually.
Yeah.
But before we get started today,
wait. Maybe eventually. What? I'm getting mixed messages here.
I wanted to talk to y'all a minute about our Earth Day episode.
Oh.
Now, before it published, we posted a pic of me being terrified of a turkey downtown.
Okay. Getting more than I bargained for here.
Look at it.
Yeah.
I look really scared.
Uh-huh.
And we asked y'all to caption it.
Uh-huh.
And this one from Wowman542 really made me laugh out loud. I'm not going to lie to y'all.
Okay. Well, these are past episodes that I have no knowledge of, but all right.
They said, body snatchers too. They took the wrong bodies, and now it's Thanksgiving. I really appreciate the effort from everybody. I needed that, especially today, because we're going to be talking about something that is surely going to get the comment section fired up.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. I barely glanced at it, honestly. I didn't want to know. I try not to look at the comment section on videos that I'm thinking about looking at or covering, because I don't want to have anything spoiled for me. But when you say something like that, you know, it's like, oh, I'm sure the comment section is going to blow up because of this. Is that why you're doing it? It always sounds like that's part of the motivation, you know? I don't know.
Dating advice.
Nah,
What?
Not that. Racism in America's schools.
Oh.
And to give y'all some context for this episode, I worked with some students from Oak Ridge High School in Conroe, Texas.
Oak Ridge High School in Conroe, Texas? I don't know town names in Texas. Okay.
And this is something that they've been thinking about a lot.
I can only imagine why they've been thinking about it a lot. It's not because they're being inundated with it daily, both by the media and school curriculums around the country and social media and everything and its brother being turned into a racial issue. I can't imagine why.
And I was down to dig into this topic with them because I don't know if y'all know, but I spent the first semester of my freshman year of high school in Texas. And I definitely remember a moment or two where I was really uncomfortable.
A moment or two. Okay. I mean, I had many moments in high school where I was uncomfortable, being made fun of and teased and bullied and marginalized for the way I looked and the way I behaved, because I was shy, wore glasses, and kind of kept to myself. Yeah. Original sins.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that racism sucks.
Oh, well, yeah.
That's my personal opinion.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that it sucks.
Yeah.
I hope that you would think that it sucks too.
Uh-huh.
And America has a racism problem.
Does it though? Does it? I mean, I guess it depends on how you assess the size of a problem, because America has a lot of problems. It has had a lot of problems since the beginning of America. It will continue to have problems forever, because anything that is not particularly right with, quote unquote, the world is a problem. But here's the question. Is it an overriding problem? That's kind of where the point of contention comes in. And I'm sure it'll come in here. Thank you, Johnny Hellcat. Wow, deep. Yeah, he's being a little facetious. It's fine. It's fine. We'll get into it, I'm sure.
And schools are no exception to that.
Well, okay. Again, he is telling a truth, I think, without realizing what truth he is telling. Because schools that, as I said, implement critical race theory or who are pushing anti-racism ideologies or the 1619 Project, all of these things constitute racism and promoting a racial assessment of people. So he's not necessarily wrong, but again, he's not wrong in the way that I think he thinks he's not wrong. I don't know that made any sense.
I mean, if you don't believe me, I bet we can just Google racism in schools or racial slurs in schools, and a bunch of stuff will pop up.
You really? You think people being jerks to each other will pop up on the internet? And so that constitutes what? Evidence of an overriding problem? Please do not tell me that is the extent of your research on this subject.
Actually, that's a good idea. Let's do it. So let me get on my phone here.
I thought I was joking.
Well, let's just see what pops up. This is from one of the Carolinas, and it says, school district investigating video of 2 Pickens Coast students using racial slurs.
Oh my God, kids using bad words. Obviously, the whole school's racist because 2 kids use bad words.
A mother says, message from Youngstown school employee contains threats and racial slurs.
She says, like, okay, what was said?
A JV football team walks off the field after alleged racial slurs and spitting incident.
Alleged. Okay, so, well, let's just say it's absolutely true. In protest, the team walked off the field. So how well thought of is racism at that school?
This is from a school in Fort Worth. Flyer promoting slave sale with prices and racial slurs found near Alito schools.
A flyer. You see, and you'll forgive me for the pause game here, but each one of these incidents causes me to ask a question, which I would hope most people would ask. And this one in particular, a flyer promoting a slave sale with prices and racial slurs. We have been inundated, especially in the last 5 years or so specifically, of things showing up that are most blatantly racist, like almost comically racist, and not too long afterwards found out to have been hoaxes or self-perpetrated crimes and so on. Now, I have no idea what the details are of the story, and I'm pretty sure our speaker will not give us any more details of this story. But when I see something like that, I am immediately suspicious of the validity of such things, as most people should be, I think, these days.
I could literally keep going.
Yeah, you could literally keep cherry picking without giving any details or looking into the information of the incidents, of course. Yeah,
it doesn't stop.
Yeah, it doesn't stop.
Student faces racial slur outside of Longfellow Middle School. I can literally keep going, and you'll just keep seeing incidents.
Yeah, and why is the media reporting on these things? I mean, setting aside the validity or the truth of any of these stories, if we lived in a totes racist country, why would this be news? Why would this be highlighted? Why would people care? Why would there be any outrage whatsoever? Ask yourself that question.
So it's definitely an issue that's happening.
Is it? Because headlines say so. You're not going to look any deeper than that? Okay.
In schools. Right there.
Oh, well, gosh. Kids being mean to each other in schools. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? Well, right there. I mean, look, I looked it up on the internet. It's right there. Do you have to ask any more questions? I mean, look at the headlines.
So that's what we're going to be exploring today.
Really? Exploring? Define exploring.
How can we make schools less racist?
Okay, so the question isn't even the question of the title of the video. The question presupposes the facts of the matter. Okay, so it's no longer a question of, is a school racist? The question is, how can we make schools less racist? Because they are already and are inherently racist. So we don't need to inquire about whether there's any truth to the actual concern. We already know. Hey, we did a Google search, guys.
All right, so the first step in making schools less racist is acknowledging racial bullying, and racism in general is a problem at schools.
Yeah. Can you imagine anyone thinking that bullying is a problem at schools? Can you imagine anyone thinking someone using something about someone in which to make fun of them for could be happening at schools? And could you imagine that someone would go to the lowest common denominator to denigrate someone in a school if you're a student? I was made fun of for being shy. I was made fun of for my glasses. I was made fun of for a lot of things. And then there were other kids who were made fun of for different things, their weight, their acne, whatever. And some kids were made fun of for their race because there wasn't anything else, I guess, to make fun of them for. But okay, yeah, it's never been considered before that bullying happens at schools and that kids are mean to each other. Yeah, well.
You can't fix something if you don't know it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
What's broken? Again, I'm sorry for pausing. It's just that every time he says something, it's just like, what is broken? How is it these? Okay, a student makes fun of another student for whatever reason, bullies another student for whatever reason. All right. Short of there being an ongoing pattern of harassment or something that the school could do, how is it the school's fault? Because the question is, how can you make the school less racist? Are you talking about the institution or are you talking about kids? Because if you want to say, how can we reduce racial bullying? Well, now that might be a more pertinent question, but that doesn't seem like where you're going.
So let's get on the same page there, because I know some of y'all are probably thinking, Miles, this isn't a problem at my school. We treat everyone with respect. We've got a school culture that doesn't discriminate. We're good people. I mean, that's awesome. Good for you.
And yet you treat that notion with such doubt and dismissiveness. Wouldn't you be glad to hear that?
But here's the thing. Just because you aren't experiencing it or witnessing it directly doesn't mean racial bullying isn't happening.
Right. Okay. So just disbelieve. Your version of events and your version of reality is true, even if you do not have information that that reality is taking place. Okay.
It can be hard to recognize it if it's not happening to you. I mean, most bad stuff that happens is under the radar. Just because you don't witness a crime doesn't mean crimes don't happen.
That's not the question. The question is it some kind of endemic problem? You know? It's like, I believe murder exists. I don't believe everyone is a murderer. You get me?
Am I right? And racism takes many forms. It's not just in-your-face aggression, like calling someone names or beating someone up because of their race.
Oh, it's not? Oh, okay. Well, tell me about this subliminal, subtle racism. Are we going into microaggression territory?
It can be more indirect, like microaggression.
Oh! How about unconscious bias? Or implicit bias? What else?
You know, mispronouncing people's names.
How do you know someone mispronouncing a name is a microaggression? I've heard that a lot of times. You know, the people intentionally mispronouncing people's names in order to racially embarrass them or something like that, which supposes that all racists know how to correctly pronounce all names and are thus making an intentional effort to mispronounce a name in order to embarrass, shame, or denigrate someone. Now, don't get me wrong. If someone mispronounces someone's name in a particular tone, there's not a whole lot of mystery as to what they are intending to do. But simply mispronouncing a name, full stop, counts as a microaggression? Okay.
Or not thinking Black and Latinx students belong in AP classes. Or
not thinking Black and Latin. Did he say Latinx? Did he say Latinx? I'm backing up a little bit.
Names. Or not thinking Black and Latinx students belong in AP classes.
Black and Latinx students don't belong in AP classes. I mean, yes, that would be decidedly racist. Is that something that happens a lot? Is that something that is part of the school's policy?
Or students of color receiving harsher discipline. Things like that.
Things like that. I mean, yeah, I could put a list of things that could happen onto a board. Is that proof that racism in schools is a endemic problem? And again, by in schools, are you talking about simply kids being idiots? Or are you talking about faculty and staff employing some kind of policy?
You don't have to be a bad person to accidentally do something racist.
You don't have to be a bad person to do something accidentally racist. Okay, so someone who does not possess in any way, shape, or form a racist ideology about people says something that you, as the observer, define as racist. That makes what they did racist. Okay, well, that's an interesting alchemy.
And this is all on top of institutional racism that schools face.
Oh, yeah, you mean like critical race theory and anti-racism training?
And for those that aren't familiar, the concept of institutional racism is it's basically racism that is embedded in an institution.
Yes, thanks for that. Tell me more.
Like schools.
Mm-hmm.
Because of a discriminatory rule or policies that the school provides. So these policies don't have to be like explicitly racist.
Oh, but they can be. See affinity groups.
To be racist. For example, you can have a dress code that bans, do-rags, dreadlocks, cornrows, afros. And while the policy itself isn't explicitly saying something like black people aren't allowed to do X, the end result is that the rule discriminates against and impacts black students more.
Okay. That might be so. I'll grant you that. So how many schools have that dress code? I don't know. I mean, did you Google the answer?
So boom, a racist policy.
Perhaps. And the only reason I say perhaps is because I'm not a mind reader and I don't know what the justification is. And are there any other hairstyles, clothing choices, and so on beyond those on that list that might otherwise impact other demographics? I mean, can you give me the full list, or are you just going to cherry pick those that apply to your demographic, in your opinion? Anyway.
And the U.S. has a long history of these types of rules in our education system.
Uh-huh.
I mean, legally mandated segregation wasn't all that long ago.
Wasn't all that long ago? Okay, well, I'll tell you what. Legally mandated segregation wasn't all that long ago. And thankfully, that's been outlawed. Tell me about affinity groups.
I mean, people are still alive today that experience stuff like this. This is a photo from 1959 from a rally in Little Rock, Arkansas, protesting the integration of high schools there. And when schools did start integrating, it wasn't smooth sailing. There was a lot of violence. I mean, U.S. Marshals had to escort black students to school because of fear for their safety.
Wow, back in the 1950s? Golly gee whiz, 70 some odd years ago? You don't say. And this has to do with what today? Except for the fact that racial segregation is being reintroduced into schools with a smile and called affinity groups. I mean, aside from that.
Take Ruby Bridges, one of the most famous pictures we've seen of this example. She's in her 60s now.
Okay, that's fine. Again, 70 some odd years ago. What does this have to do with right now again?
Like, that's the same age as some of my aunts, some of y'all's aunts, some of y'all's grandmas, some of y'all's parents even. So what can we do about all this racism?
What can we do about all this racism after bringing up Ruby Bridges as though nothing has changed since then? I don't know. What could we do? Oh, I don't know. How about the Education Amendments of 1976? I think, fingers crossed that my memory isn't completely off. I don't know, the Civil Rights Act in general. I don't know, what could we do? You know what we could do? We could outlaw affinity groups from schools. We could outlaw critical race theory. We could outlaw anti-racism teachings. The 1619 Project. All this racist, revisionist history stuff that is trying to tell students, and have teachers do so, that we are all to assess one another on the basis of skin color as far as worth and place in society and victimhood or villainhood. How about that?
I thought I'd start by chatting with Leslie and Amiyali,
Okay.
who are helping to lead the fight against racism at their school.
Oh,
They go to Lowell here in San Francisco, which has been in the news for a bunch of racial controversy.
like?
And to give y'all some context, it's an elite public high school.
Okay, he's going through headlines and not saying them. So they have, for those of you listening at home, there's a headline on the screen now. San Francisco's elite Lowell High School reeling from slurs, pornography during anti-racism lesson. Again, in the absence of context, I don't know what they're talking about. And if it was such an accepted and wonderful thing at Lowell High School, why would they be reeling? Why would this be a problem? Why would these two students he's about to talk to be allowed to do what they're doing if it was actually a racist school?
With a large Asian American population.
Another headline, Lowell High rocked by yet another wildly racist incident, this time in an online class. Okay. So 2 times, I guess, where somebody said something racist at school. Have you ever gone to high school? Have you ever been around teenagers or kids and how they treat one another in general? Okay.
And it can be tough for Black and brown students who make up a very small portion of the student body.
And another one, students at Lowell High School fed up with racist culture demand changes. Racist culture such as what? I mean, again, you're not giving me enough information. And this is PBS and something that purports to be quasi-educational. So,
but Leslie and Amiyali think students can play a big part in changing the status quo on campus.
Oh, do tell.
I know me and Leslie always use our social media platforms to speak out about anything we can to get the message out there that we are here. We do face these microaggressions. And
I'm sure you do face microaggressions. I'm sure that you do. As defined, I'm sure you face microaggressions all the time. I'm sure you find microaggressions everywhere.
And we can do something about it. We have a lot of power.
They basically got fed up with what they saw as a lack of response from their school officials regarding all the racist stuff happening, ranging from everyday microaggressions like teachers and students mispronouncing people's names.
Teachers and students mispronouncing people's names. So mispronouncing a name is inherently and intentionally racist. It signifies a racist culture to mispronounce a name. The person knows how to pronounce the name correctly and is making an intentional effort to mispronounce the name. And this constitutes a racist culture. I just want to make sure I got that clear enough.
On purpose.
On purpose. Okay, so again, mispronouncing a name does not signify that someone simply does not know how to pronounce a name or is just not used to pronouncing a particular name or whatever. Instead, it is an intentional effort made in order to shame another person on the basis of their race. I just want to make sure I got that correctly. Okay.
More extreme incidents like students dropping pornographic and racist images in a school Padlet discussion.
Kids saying bad words and porn in this day and age, if you can believe it. Okay. So pornography is now racist inherently. Is that it? I need some more details. I really, really need some more details.
It was after that incident that the students organized a rally to speak out against racism.
We had our friend Siobhan. She basically hosted a rally and organized it with the help of other people within the SAC.
They're not practicing social distancing. Mm-hmm.
Council. And there we were able to really catch a lot of people's attentions because they're like, wow, these are a bunch of students from all different types of backgrounds. Asian.
Backgrounds. I like how this couched language is becoming more pervasive. Backgrounds.
Latinos, Muslims, like, and literally just like you just have to reach out to other people because it's just not work that you can do alone. You need to do it together.
Why are you putting Muslim in the same category as racial demographics? It's a religion, not a race. But okay, tell me more about racism.
They'd like to see their school adopt some anti-racist policies.
Anti-racist policies such as?
And when I say anti-racist, what I mean is actively disrupting racism.
Oh, actively disrupting racism, right. Which presupposes the place is already racist. So what is an actively disruptive anti-racist policy?
We did a whole video on the concept, so check it out. But the idea is basically it's not enough to simply not be racist.
Okay, right. Okay, so simply not being racist, simply being the change you want to see is not enough. Being a role model for yourself and for others is not enough. What is enough?
You got to do stuff that fights against the system that, enables racism to still exist.
Murder will never be eliminated. Theft will never be eliminated. Racism will never be eliminated. But you need to tell me what system enables racism. And not some broad sort of abstract, name a school and point to the system, point to the policy, point to the behavior that enables racism. I am honestly all ears because I would not want a school employing a racist policy, a blatantly racist policy. Like affinity groups. Can I get anybody else on board with me on that one?
So I definitely think it starts with the teachers and them learning our culture and unlearning a lot of oppressive ideas that they already carry.
You want to re-educate the teachers to learn your culture. Why? Why do they need to learn about your culture? And I know I'm sounding a little, sarcastic, but I am very curious. What relevance or use would there be in them learning your culture? What would that cure? And what exactly constitutes your culture?
And I also think that students need to educate themselves as well.
Not only just educating the teachers can only go so far. For me, I think that ethnic studies must be mandatory.
Ethnic studies must be mandatory. Well, I guess it would depend on what you mean by ethnic studies, or what is it that you are hoping such studies will accomplish by making them mandatory?
And for y'all that don't know, ethnic studies is a class that covers racial and ethnic conflict in the United States.
Is it? And I'm not being facetious when I ask that question. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've been in school. So I'm using the Google, guys. Ethnic studies. Okay, ethnic studies is an academic field that spans the humanities and the social sciences. It emerged as an academic field in the second half of the 20th century, partly in response to charges that traditional social science and humanities disciplines such as anthropology, history, literature, sociology, political science, where did it go? Sorry about that. Okay. Political science, cultural studies, and area studies were conceived from an inherently Eurocentric perspective. Its origin comes before the civil rights era as early as the 1900s. During this time, educator and historian W.E.B. Du Bois, or Du Bois, I've heard it different ways, expressed the need for teaching Black history. However, ethnic studies became widely known as a secondary issue that arose after the civil rights era. ethnic studies was originally conceived to reframe the way that specific disciplines had told the stories, histories, struggles, and triumphs of people of color on what was seen to be their own terms. In recent years, it has broadened its focus to include questions of representation, racialization, racial formation theory, and more determinedly interdisciplinary topics and approaches. Okay, I didn't know what the definition of ethnic studies was, so moving on.
And research from the National Education Association shows that these classes, quote, help foster cross-cultural understanding among both students of color and white students, and aids students in valuing their own cultural identity while appreciating the differences around them.
Cross-cultural understanding among both students of color and white students. Why are you categorizing students on the basis of race? Why can't you just say students of varying backgrounds or something? Why that specific division? Just seems kind of odd to me, given the purported goal of the whole thing.
I mean, that sounds positive to me.
Yeah. There's a word for something that sounds reasonable, but is actually either nonsense or the reverse. It's called sophistry. Here, let me give the specific. Sophistry, the use of fallacious arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving. Yeah, it sounds good. Is it, though?
And on top of all that, Amiyali and Leslie also talked about wanting more accountability for students that do engage in racist behaviors and more support for students who are traumatized by them.
So what accountability would you hold to someone who mispronounces a name? I mean, absent any other context or information, because we already know that simply mispronouncing a name is an intentional act and a racist act. I'm curious, what kind of accountability should be applied to someone who commits such a sin?
I mean, which makes sense to me. I mean, schools have no problem creating zero tolerance drug policies. Why can't they do the same with racial bullying?
Well, here's the thing. Possessing marijuana on campus is kind of a straightforward thing. If you have marijuana in your possession, you're violating the drug policy. The no racism, zero tolerance policy, well, racism is an ideology. Racism is thus an idea. And when you dilute the idea of racism down to, I mispronounce someone's name, well, what are you going to do? What would you say is a zero tolerance policy for that? Because that act alone is enough to qualify as racism. So, if a teacher or a student mispronounces someone's name, are they fired? Are they expelled? I mean, you tell me.
You know what I mean?
And also, I think it's very important that in freshman orientation, I would love to see our school body tell the incoming freshmen, if you do this, if you are racist, then you're gonna have to get booted out of Lowell, because it's not cool to have those type of students at our school making other students feel unsafe. Like, that's not cool.
We need
Unsafe. Okay. Well, having a no racist slurs and so on policy, just like no bad words and so on, that's fine. You know, there are codes of conduct at most schools and institutions, so fine. Okay. But again, if you're going to define racism as personally interpreted slights, who will be the inquisition on those things when it comes down to something that is entirely subjective? Right? Racial slurs are kind of a known quantity. If you call someone a racial slur, I won't give examples here because who knows what YouTube would do if I did, it's pretty obvious. There's really no, it's not very, it is not ambiguous. Good Lord. I'm losing my ability to talk today. So what do you do? Who makes that decision? What kind of counsel will you have to adjudicate these things. Do you know what you are suggesting? I guess is my question.
A lot of support, whether that's counseling, teachers, or just staff who we can talk to and get support when we need it, and who are willing to step up when we voice out a problem.
I want to acknowledge for a moment how hard it can be for students to fight against racism.
Yeah, it's hard to fight against something where you're constantly making it up as you go along, or you're effectively instituting racism while saying you're fighting against racism by making everything about skin color. I can imagine it is difficult when none of it makes any sense and cognitive dissonance is the rule of the day.
Not only are they dealing with the trauma that racism causes, but there's also the power dynamic between a student and a teacher, or the student and admin, that can make it hard to call this stuff out.
For me,
Make it hard to call it out? Like what? Give me an example.
I'll try to call a teacher out, and although they feel they have like that kind of power over me because of their title, like they are a teacher, I still try to call them out and like tell friends, tell staff.
I think it's
See, this is one of the problems with like an edited down interview and everything. And of course, the inability to ask follow-up questions. Call them out for what? Give me some examples, some active examples of what you mean. You know, because calling someone out for having a wrong idea, especially when you have reduced the definition of that idea down to the most abstract and subjective things, I cannot help but think back to the Crucible, you know, where it becomes such a situation where the accusation alone is evidence because you have made everything a crime, so long as you're the one saying it is. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Like moving the goalposts, like. Yeah. I mean, this is the scary thing. If everything can be called racist, and being racist is a fireable offense or a exilable offense and so on, you want to talk about power dynamics? Look at McCarthyism.
saddening to know that students have to do the work because the adults that we're supposed to confide in and look up to aren't doing it for us.
Well, now that is a very telling statement. Students have to do the work because the adults aren't doing it for us. Oh, the work.
And a lot of what Amiale, Leslie, and I talked about is really consistent with all the research I've done on how to create anti-racist school cultures.
All the research? Oh, did you just Google all that too?
There's basically lots of different suggestions out there of what schools can do, like these. Number one, create comprehensive anti-racist or equity policies.
Comprehensive anti-racist or equity policies, okay? Such as?
Now, these policies should have clear, actionable goals.
Such as?
Like setting a goal that students in AP classes fully represent the student population of the school and, are not heavily skewed towards white students from highly resourced middle schools.
So you want advanced placement classes to have a population statistically reflective of the school's population. You don't want to have advanced placement classes populated with students who have, by their own merits, earned a place in the advanced placement classes. You want the first filter to be racial demographic statistics. That is an anti-racist equity policy. Well, I will grant you that. It is definitely an equity policy, as in equality of outcome. So that is a good idea to you. Okay.
It can also mean getting rid of racist policies, like those dress codes that I was talking about earlier, or discipline policies that end up more negatively affecting students of color.
Again, you're going to have to give me some information. Just saying so does not make it so. I've looked at many, many, many studies in the past, and if you take selective numbers, yes, you can make anything look very racist. If you don't also include the population density of one demographic versus another, or how you are wording the study and so on and so on. I mean, oh man, I tell you what, this drives me a little bit nuts. Matt and Flint, thanks so much. If they're so worried about division between races, then why are they calling themselves African American, Latin American, etc., when they were born in the U.S.? That is one of the more sort of like, for lack of a better word, the soft core division of people on the basis of appearance and etc. There is use in statistics when it comes to population count and other things, and it's not completely irrelevant depending on what you're looking at or how you're assessing things. I mean, it all depends on the context. But most especially with what's being pushed in schools these days, it's not so much dividing people on, I guess, the assumed background or ethnicity or anything else, but so much as evaluating people's worth, evaluating people's quote unquote lived experience. This student is obviously underprivileged or underserved because they look like X, and this student is obviously overserved or privileged because they look like Y. And this student needs to learn to be an ally because this student is obviously a victim, and on and on and on. You know, there are plenty of reasons that you would want to distinguish people on the basis of appearance. I mean, we always make the argument like, who should play Dr. Martin Luther King in a movie? Well, obviously it should be Pedro Pascal, right? I mean, that's one of those things. It's not completely irrelevant. It's how it's used, how you then assess and judge people. That's the major problem. And that's kind of what's being pushed here. Or you're pushing race over merit, which our speaker already has. So anyway, moving on. Oh, yeah, by the way, there's a really great, if you haven't already seen it, it's several years old now, but there was an interview on, I think, at CNN. I think it was Piers Morgan or something, or it was Mike. No, it was Mike Wallace. I think it was Mike Wallace and Morgan Freeman. You know, look up Mike Wallace and Morgan Freeman, where they're talking to each other about race. And Morgan Freeman kind of knocks it all out of the park for himself. So check that one out. That's how I wish more people would look at the world. I really do.
Number 2, recruit more Black and brown teachers who are dedicated to anti-racist and equity missions.
So you want to have schools base their hiring decisions on race and ideological purity. Okay. Got it.
I can think I had maybe like 3 Black teachers in my whole K through 12 school experience.
So you're really paying attention to the race of your teachers in schools. That was really important to you, and it's important to you now. Okay. Should white teachers be teaching Black students? I hear that one, at least roundabouts, quite a bit. You know, students should be able to see themselves in their teachers, or teachers should be able to share an understanding of the lived experience of their students. I wonder what our speaker would say to that one.
So I definitely think that would have helped my experiences in school.
Why? Why? How? I know, I'm honestly curious. How would just having a teacher who is Black have helped your experience in school? I really want to know.
Number 3, you can teach culturally responsive content.
Culturally responsive content. Culturally responsive content. So teaching things that respond to the zeitgeist, well, sometimes that can be useful if you want to take a real world active example of something going on and relate it back to something educational. Is that what you mean?
Now, this can mean making sure that you hear about the experiences and contributions of people of color across the board.
Yes, I suppose it could if you're just teaching American history or world history, or you know that I learned about Nelson Mandela in elementary school. Can you believe that I learned about Dr. Martin Luther King in elementary school? Can you believe that? And I'm old now, right? I'm totes old, yo. Anyway.
Like, I want to hear about the Chinese laborers who built the railroads.
I did. I mean, again, I don't know what school you went to. I don't know the quality of your education and so on and so forth. I learned about that. I knew about that when I was a kid. So I don't know. I come from an antiquated time, I suppose.
Not just the rich guys who own the companies.
Leland Stanford. I don't know the name. I never learned about that guy. I learned about the railroad barons, at least abstractly. But okay.
Let's hear about Gladys West, a black mathematician who created the model of the Earth that was used for a little thing called GPS, which literally billions of people rely on every day.
Okay. And are there any other relatively obscure figures in science or history that are not black that you find interesting? I don't know. What would you like me to know about things and people? How about Philo T. Farnsworth? Should we learn about Philo T. Farnsworth? If you don't know who Philo T. Farnsworth is, well, you might want to learn about him, because otherwise I probably, or at least not in this way, would be able to watch our speaker talk right now, or anyone else on the internet or elsewise, after a fashion.
Like, I didn't know that. I had to Google that. I didn't learn that in school. You know what I mean?
There's a lot of things you don't learn in school because they're not necessarily relevant to an overall general education. I don't know if you know that. Elementary school, high school, they don't give you all information on all things and all people. If you have an interest in a particular subject, yeah, you kind of have to go seek it out for yourself occasionally. Thank you, Manic. You can't see it on the screen, but it's hiya, Dogcat Fox. Dogcat Fox, Manic saying hi. Wowie, wow, wow. Dogcat Fox says hello back. Thank you, Manic. Okay, tell me more about how that was a racist thing that schools did not teach about a lady who made a thing that went on to be used in bigger things. That is the result of a racist policy, is it? Okay.
And in English class, let's read more books by people of color, not just the classics from white authors.
So you want to discriminate books on the basis of the skin color of the author. Well, what if this class is about classical literature? I mean, I had this same kind of debate, so to speak, with a TEDx I did recently that asked about what's wrong with English class. I think that was the title or something close to it. And the speaker therein made a similar argument that, you know, oh, those old books are old and outdated and don't mean anything anymore. We need to have some modern classics and things like that. And like, well, there's a thing called modern literature class. I took that in college. You can take that too. Why eliminate the classics? I had lots of classes in high school that exposed me to a whole lot of books. And they weren't all white authors, amazingly enough, if you can believe it. Anyway.
Please. And number 4, don't tolerate racist slurs and acts.
Now, that one I have no problem with, except for the question that has overrode everything else in this presentation. And how you define a racist slur and or action. Because when you include microaggressions, when you include things that are entirely interpretive, there's that word micro in there, and you also give the example of mispronouncing a name as qualifying as a racist action and or slur, depending on how you want to put it, that's where I get a little concerned. And so do tell, what constitutes a lack of tolerance for such things? Is it immediate expulsion or termination of your job?
Now, I know the students also mentioned this, but I definitely think it's worth repeating. Just like, don't allow it. And there should be clear consequences for when it does happen.
Such as?
If the school, the institution takes a stand on something, it will change.
Yes, that's true. And so tell me about the institution, the school, that says racist behavior and slurs are acceptable in America. You tell me, you point to me the school or schools that have the institutional policy that racist slurs and behaviors towards other students are acceptable. Show me that school, and I'll be right there with you decrying that school and demanding change. Okay? And while you're at it, there's a little school in Minnesota I'd like you to take a look at if you have the time. They're promoting racial segregation in their school. I think you and I could get on board with being a bit offended by that.
There's precedent for this stuff. I mean, just think of racist acts like smoking. Back in the day, about half of California public schools allowed smoking on campus. Now, can you imagine schools allowing students to smoke on campus today?
Can you imagine schools segregating students on the basis of their skin color today? Unfortunately, I can. I don't mean to keep coming back to this, but it is happening. It is the most blatant example of a reversion of all the progress that has purportedly been made over the last 50 or 60 years. Outlawing smoking. Okay, well, can you imagine there are laws on the books that outlaw racial discrimination in schools? Does smoking still occur on campus even though it's against the rules? Does that make the school pro-smoking? Smoking in the boys' room. Remember that song, Smoking in the Boys' Room? You know why that song exists is because it was not allowed to smoke in the school. But kids did it anyway because, well, kids are kids. Does that make the school pro-smoking? Because some kids decided to break the rules? You tell me.
No, you can't. Smoking is bad for your health. Racism is also bad for your health and the health of a community. So just don't allow it.
Yeah. You know what else isn't allowed? Murder and theft. Those are not allowed in society. Do they still happen? Yeah. Murder still takes place in this country. Does that make this country pro-murder? I don't know. You tell me. I'm using your logic.
It'll change. All right. So like the students and I said before, creating more inclusive and less racist schools is an ongoing effort.
Yeah, well, when you have a goal that can never be totally reached, when you keep redefining what racism is, it'll be an ongoing effort. I guarantee you.
But it's not hopeless. And if you're a student and looking for how to help your school become anti-racist.
How to help my school become anti-racist. Yeah.
Start demanding the change. Check out some resources in the description below that you can share with your parents, teacher, principals, school board, whoever. And I'll leave you with these wise words from Leslie.
Okay, give me some wise words.
With pain comes beauty. And, it's going to be exhausting. You're going to wish and wonder why you even have to be doing this in the first place. Or is it really worth it?
Yeah, those are some really good questions. Really good questions. If you go out seeking evil all the time and redefining what evil is so that you'll always find it, Is it worth doing? Does it make any sense?
And let me tell you, it is worth it.
Ah.
Go do it. Go be the change that you want to see, because
No. I can't just be the change I want to see. I can't just not be a jerk to people. I have to assume everyone else is being a jerk like I'm totally not, and policing and judging everyone and everything for anything that I decide is a misstep. You just got through, or I should say this presentation just got through telling me that. I can't simply, in my own life and in my own behaviors and interactions, reject racist thinking and just not even apply it. No. I have to assume anything that I see that I interpret as racist when I'm totally not being racist is racist, and hold someone to account for the racism that I have interpreted that they are committing and need to be punished for because I said so. That's what I should be doing.
you know, if it wasn't for us students here in San Francisco speaking out, we wouldn't be able to support other students. And I think it's important to create a community, because
Create a community of inherent victims is what you're doing. Inherent victims and inherent villains. That is what you are doing, whether you know it or not. And I'm pretty sure you don't.
we are the next generation to
Yeah.
be the leaders in the future.
And isn't that a scary thought?
And if we don't do it now, then who's going to do it, and when is it going to ever get done?
So what do y'all think? What changes would you like to see at school to fight racism?
Because we already know that racism exists at your school as an institutional practice, because we already know that. And since everything and anything could be racist if someone says it is, we need to fight back against it. Because.
Let us know in the comments below. As always, thank you for watching. And be sure to check out some of our other videos like this one on school dress codes, or this one on anti-racism.
I'm assuming that there would be links on the screen if this were playing on YouTube.
As you can see, we talk about this stuff a lot. So
yeah, I can imagine that you do, because it is a very easy subject to talk about and exploit. It really is. You know, it's a never-ending quest for purity of thought and mind, and always looking for the next dragon to slay, even if you have to conjure it into existence of your own volition most of the time. Okay, well, yeah. So this presentation kind of threw a gear through what's the car phrase, through a rod, I suppose, right at the beginning, by changing the entire question that was being asked. Right? Is your school racist? Was the title of the video. And that's an entirely separate thing from how can you reduce racism in your school? One asks the question, is. The other just asks the question, how? The second one presupposing the existence of the problem without really having to prove it. And the only proof you need is a Google search of headlines and someone mispronouncing a name. If that's the standard by which you're going to try to police racism in your school, you got your work cut out for you. I'll give you that. You're going to have a long, hard road in cleansing your school of such things. Anyway, that was that. This program is produced, or at least sponsored, by PBS, which doesn't say anything about PBS. It is a show unto itself. Opinions expressed are those by the speakers therein, and so on and so forth. I don't hold PBS to account for this or something, insofar as, they believe what these people have said. Because, just because one or two people involved in an institution do a couple of things does not necessarily mean the entire institution thus agrees with everything they have to say. But then we don't really live in that world anymore, do we? If one person of a particular type does a thing, it suddenly becomes an editorial on all people who fall into that demographic. If a man does blah, the question becomes, why do men do blah? Right? If a black person does X, the question becomes, why are black people blah? That is not the question to ask. That is the wrong way to go about it. And the question itself says a lot about where you're coming from in your perspective on people. But I digress, if only slightly. I'll take a couple of minutes here if you guys have any comments or anything else you'd like to say. And then I will wrap this up for today. I was curious to find out what this had to say, obviously. And I found out. You don't know unless you ask. And again, I have an inclination. In fact, I think I might do that. If our speaker here has a Twitter account, and perhaps he does, I am inclined to tweet him a question on what he thinks about the video I did not too long ago on that school in Minnesota, the Ann Bremer Education Center. That's what it was, Ann Bremer? I think it was Ann Bremer. And their affinity group initiative. Because there are things that are interpretively racist, like someone mispronouncing a name as though you could necessarily know their intent, lacking a mind reading ability. And then there's something that is blatantly and literally racially divisive, like racial affinity groups. I'd be curious to know what he thinks about affinity groups, racial affinity groups being introduced into schools. But maybe I will ask that question. Let's see. Mike R. Scribe Light, got time for a TEDx? No, I'm gonna save off on the TEDx. I do have a short-ish TEDx that I may bring up on a Lords of the Night upcoming. We'll see. But I only have so much bandwidth mentally for this kind of stuff today. And I have some things going on later this afternoon that I need to get prepared for. So Bastard B says, hit like on the way out. I appreciate it when you do. Thank you so much. Scanner Daphne, people are people, so why should it be you and I should get along so awfully? I don't think I'd get along awfully with our speaker. You know, I don't inherently believe that. Obviously, I disagree with some of the opinions or interpretations of things, or the way in which the information was presented as fact, and so on. But at least I would hope we wouldn't get along awfully. I can't know that, but I mean, like I say, maybe I'll touch base on Twitter and see what he has to say. Chicago Mike, I am worried about our future. Well, and not to sound too philosophical, I think everybody should be, to some extent or another, worried about the future all the time. Not to the point of becoming, catatonic, but just in the abstract, not be complacent. To just pay attention to what's going on around you, plan for the future and so on and so forth. I mean, why do people save money? Why do people get insurance and so on? Everybody's worried about the future to a certain extent. And I think there's a level of healthy worry. But the pitfall, of course, and I just alluded to it, is letting it overwhelm you. Just as an aside before I sign off, I have heard from many people over the last 4 years or so that I've been doing this, who have contacted me privately and otherwise, talking about either the subject matter in my videos or just things we talk about on Lords of the Night, and expressing to me how the things that are going on today are literally overwhelming them. It's becoming a mental burden with all of the divisiveness, all of the chaos, all of the seeming insanity that is being pumped into us day in and day out by the media and politicians, and everything's falling apart. And I just want to remind everyone, this is your, I guess, Scribe Light PSA for the day. you can turn it off and the world's still going to turn. And I'm not meaning to sound condescending when I say that, so just turn it off. You don't want to watch it. It's true though. I have found myself, just as the artifact of what I do as a hobby / side gig, depending on how you look at it, falling into a bubble. It is easy to fall into a bubble and an echo chamber if all you're paying attention to all the time is this stuff. And it is concerning and it is disturbing. And I wouldn't be doing series like Curriculum of Fear or Expatriate Games or TED Excellence if I wasn't, to a certain extent, concerned and worried about what's going on in the world. But you have to keep a sense of humor about it. That is part of my therapy, such as it is for doing things like this, is to think about what's being said, not let it overtake me, and remember that more often than not, cooler heads are prevailing, and that there are mechanisms in place to eventually right the ship, as it were, when things go off the tracks, as I keep using mixed metaphors. Don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed with all the badness of the world and everything else. There is a lot of good going on, and it is not overtaking everyone. And a lot of what you see in the media is the squeaky wheels getting the grease. Take a deep breath, laugh at yourself, laugh at the world. Try not to take it too seriously. And, better days are ahead, as they say. Thank you, Gay Rascal, for the dancing, lovely dog, cat, fox. Thank you so much, Rascal. I appreciate it. With all of that aside, everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this. It was a bit of a slog, as I think I expected. Hope you all have a good rest of your day. If you'd like to hear more from me or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find the both of us tomorrow night, Monday night, on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories you submit, what we've been up to on the internet, and your questions and comments. Everyone, again, hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. I hope you are all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.